Tanase, I'm TR Wheatley, Mino Punapanil. Welcome to APTN National News. Today, Canada is coming together to discuss what economic opportunities and key issues are facing the country. The meeting is in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and the premiers have just begun the roundtable. Our video journalist Rachel May was there as the premiers went into the meeting.
I'm here at the First Minister's meeting. It's exciting to see all of the premiers come together. They have a lot of hope for Canadian unity. That's a word that we're hearing a lot today, hoping to unite Canada to become the strongest power in the G7. Mark Carney asked all of the premiers to come with ideas about pressing issues for their province. We've heard everything from pipelines to wildfires. Wildfires are something that is unfortunately plaguing Western Canada right now. When we think about wildfires, they are spreading rapidly across Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. We heard from Premier Danielle Smith. She says that previously they had run campaigns to raise awareness about fire safety, and that had actually resulted in a significant drop in man-made fires. So they are planning to put that back in effect. As far as what is happening at a federal level, that is yet to be determined, but there will be discussions. Premier Scott Moe is also excited. Premier Scott Moe had said that he is happy to work with Canada. He said that he feels as though the Western provinces do have a chance to be heard, which is something that Western Canada previously may not have felt. So he is optimistic. As far as pipelines and oil, it's a very mixed bag amongst premiers. There are some people who are very excited for it, some people who are just open to hearing what other premiers say. All of the premiers did come forward and say that this isn't one voice over another, rather it is a collective voice. We're coming together for a stronger, better Canada. So at the end of this day, we're hoping that the premiers come together, they make a priority list, and that really does suit both Western, Eastern, Northern needs. The Northern premiers also send their hopes and prayers and condolences to those affected by the wildfires. Most of the premiers did mention that.
Thousands of wildfire evacuees continue to arrive in Winnipeg, many with little more than the clothes on their backs. APTN Sierra Bettens brings you to donation drives unfolding in the city and hears from concerned family members waiting for their loved ones to be evacuated.
Hundreds of donations of clothing, toys, and hygiene products for Manitoba wildfire evacuees are piling up at the First Nations Family Advocate Office in downtown Winnipeg. Upstairs, a team of helpers are sorting them. Kayla Frank is leading the efforts.
I'm extremely surprised and happy of how many donations we've been receiving, even within this last hour. It's continuously, staff are going downstairs, getting donations, bringing them up. We're sorting it all together.
Later today, donations will be transported and distributed to thousands of evacuees.
And a lot of times they're just leaving with the clothing on their backs. And so we wanted to do something to give back to the evacuees so that when they do come to Winnipeg, they have belongings here waiting for them.
Over 17,000 people in Manitoba are being evacuated from wildfires after a province-wide state of emergency was declared on Wednesday. Over 100 people have been evacuated from Puckatawagan or Matthias Colomb Cree Nation, but thousands still remain. The fire is still out of control, and the community has no all-season access road. Matthias Colomb's former chief, Lorna Biggity, spoke with APTN over the phone Friday from the PAW. Her family members are still stranded in Puckatawagan.
The smoke is so thick over there, they said. I'm talking to my family members because they're still out there. Mm-hmm. My babies are still out there. My grandchildren waiting.
On Thursday evening, Puckatawagan's airport closed due to nearby fires. They've been without power for days.
There weren't that many people that left yesterday because of the airport. They have to evacuate from the airport because there was a fire right there. We don't even know if it's okay now. People are out there stranded, fighting for their lives right now.
At a Friday press conference, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew said the Canadian Armed Forces have been sent to Pukatawagan. He also confirmed the airport wasn't damaged. Kinew said thousands more are expected to evacuate to Winnipeg today. Eager to help, Nigel Michael Paul, a Métis artist who owns the Art Plus Fashion apparel store in the city's West End, is packing backpacks filled with clothing and essential goods to give to evacuees once they land.
It's important to give back to the community because that's what makes a community. Us all taking part of it, showing that we care about each other. I think that's important because there's a lot of good people in Winnipeg.
Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Earlier this year, an 18-year-old woman from Waterhen First Nation in Saskatchewan was found deceased near another First Nation. RCMP say the death is not suspicious, but the family disagrees. Again, here's APTN video journalist Rachel May.
Addison was really considerate of making sure that everybody knew where she was.
When 18-year-old Addison King didn't come home or answer her phone on April 15th, her family acted fast. Her aunt Loretta King said they started searching, hoping she was safe.
We drove around, we searched for her. As soon as we knew that her mom didn't have contact with her, we started to make our efforts, including my parents.
Later that day, the family filed a missing persons report with the RCMP. The next day, her body was found by a member of the ground search team near a river by the Flying Dust First Nation, a community she had close ties with.
Unfortunately, that ground search ended really quickly, within, an hour or so. When we realized that she was deceased, it was like every moment was a nightmare.
The details of Addison's death are not being shared, but the RCMP said in a statement to APTN, "We are unable to provide specifics of our investigation to be mindful of its integrity, as well as Addison's privacy." Evidence gathered to date indicates that Addison's death is not criminal in nature. Despite the case being described as non-criminal in nature, King finds it suspicious that no one had heard from Addison, as she was always in regular contact with someone in regards to her whereabouts.
It's not the moment that she was deceased. It was what led up to this. What actually led up to it? What was going on in that lapse of time that we don't know about?
The family is pushing for the RCMP to do more to find out what happened in Addison's final moments. King says her family will keep pushing for answers from anyone with even the smallest tip. They want the officers handling MMIWG2S cases to remember these are loved ones and families are grieving.
It's extra challenging in any time when there's a loss. But when you have to humanize your loved one over and over, because maybe the RCMP don't have a connection to the community. Maybe they don't know the family members.
Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
For the first time, First Nations in the Atlantic region will have representation when the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization, NASCO, meets next month. NASCO is an international organization that conserves and restores wild Atlantic salmon in the North Atlantic. Northern governments, including Canada, cooperate to conserve salmon, which have been in decline since the 1980s. The 42nd annual meeting of NASCO is taking place in Cardiff, Wales this June, and for the first time, Indigenous voices will be heard. Shelley Denny is part of the Indigenous delegation. She is a Mi'kmaq scientist and senior advisor at the Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources.
Indigenous knowledge contribute a different way of looking at the world. And I think that's what's missing, right? They're in their prescriptive zone of this is the science, this is the management, whereas Indigenous peoples have always been the scientists and the managers. I think that's, the inclusivity of it all is something that we can bring to the table and bring and enhance their understanding of a different way of looking at salmon and salmon management.
Time for a short break. When we come back, we speak with National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak about the Premier's meeting and more. Stay with us. Welcome back. Premiers from across Canada are meeting in Saskatoon today with Prime Minister Mark Carney. Provincial and territorial leaders will be laying out so-called nation-building projects for the PM to consider. Last week, a letter was sent to the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, inviting her to, quote, consult and cooperate on proposed legislation on national interest projects. For more on this is National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak. National Chief, as we mentioned, the Privy Council office wrote you to invite you to consult and cooperate on legislation that moves forward projects of national interest. You've responded. What was your response to the Prime Minister?
Well, while we support efforts to protect Canada from geopolitical and economic uncertainty, First Nations are very concerned that this federal proposal has the potential to violate many collective rights of First Nations, respecting our lands, our waters, resources, inherent title rights, jurisdiction in our treaties. First Nations, I've told the Prime Minister, will require clarification respecting the design of Crown First Nations engagement and consultation timelines and how rights holders will be invited to respond to the Crown on this matter. Like First Nations, need to know that. And the rights of First Nations are under international law and the Constitution of Canada are at stake. So if free, prior, and informed consent is not obtained from First Nations, this legislation will be marred and mirrored in conflict and protracted litigation.
The premiers are meeting with the Prime Minister today to talk about some of these proposed projects. Should First Nations be part of those meetings?
They absolutely should have been. I know that national chiefs, all national chiefs before me have always stated that they should have been there. First Nations should be there and have a full seat at the table. It just seems like, it's always trying to leave First Nations out and coming to us at the last minute and saying, okay, let's work on this together. And that's not a way to work this country. This country, if they look back historically, every time that, when we don't work together right away, things become mirrored in conflict. And if this country wants to do better, they should have had a full seat at the table for First Nations.
In your letter to the PM, you said that this kind of legislation could be a serious threat to First Nations. We're seeing provinces trying to push similar legislation. How concerning is all of that for you?
Well, if the national vision from Canada for First Nations, say infrastructure, is going to be focused exclusively on accessing natural resources, First Ministers need to rethink and broaden their perspectives. I'll say this further. I think Canada needs to start with fast tracking basics like clean water to our First Nations people, quality housing, modern schools. Many of our kids, their schools need to be fixed, or they need bigger schools because our demographics are growing every year. They need all season roads and community infrastructure. And last week, King Charles III, of course, he read the speech from the throne and said governments need to honor truth and reconciliation in both word and in deed. And in a country as rich as Canada, the shameful gap must be closed once and for all when it comes to infrastructure. And this is the mother of all Canadian infrastructure and reconciliation projects. So if we want to talk about that, let's talk about the basics for First Nations people.
Quickly, on another note, many provinces have thousands of people, many First Nations under evacuation. Some concerns have been raised in Manitoba over how things are playing out. What have you been hearing when it comes to the evacuation process?
Absolutely. Look, I think that the provinces need to make sure that they're making sure that First Nations leadership is listened to. And I know that there's lots of work being done all weekend. Look, I rolled my sleeves and helped this weekend too, and helped with some families where I could. And we're in this together. I know it's Mother Nature, but at the same time, there's probably so many lessons learned, but at the same time, trying to work together to make sure that our people are getting to safety as they should. It's still very much in crisis mode, and making sure that if you have conferences and if you have hockey games or other hockey tournaments, and I know that that's the Canadian way, but the Canadian way is also that we help each other. And I think that if we're hearing the scarcity of hotel rooms, especially across the prairies, and many people being pushed to hundreds of thousands, thousands of kilometers away in other hotels just to find hotel rooms. I think that that's disheartening for many families in a crisis. And, I think making sure that we listen to the leadership and making sure that we try and work together and being in constant communication. I know I want to uplift our leadership for, we've seen this before, unfortunately, the 2011 flood, the 2019 ice storm, the 2020 to 2020 pandemic, when the pandemic started. And we've seen this time and time again. And, First Nations need to be better equipped. We keep pushing for it. And Canada needs to come to the table and have a real talk about, emergency management and making sure that First Nations are more equipped to deal with that. We keep pushing for it, and First Nations are doing the best with what they have, and they have very little, yet they're stretching it far and helping each other. And so I lift the leadership up from right across the country, helping each other, offering support. And, I think there's so many lessons to be learned in this, but at the same time, in the meantime, to make sure that people are getting to safety and making sure that we, what's our next game plan, right? Where that we provide that support to the nations. So, thank you.
Thank you for your time today, National Chief.
Yeah, thank you.
And here are our results of our web poll questions. Last week on aptnnews.ca, we asked, did you follow the throne speech that King Charles III read? 53% said yes and 47% voted no. Do you agree with building military bases in the Arctic? 63% said yes, 20% voted unsure, and 17% voted no. How are you planning to celebrate Indigenous History Month in June? 55% say in every possible way. 22% say watching documentaries on Indigenous history. 9% of you say visiting Indigenous-led museums or art galleries. 8% say reading non-fiction books by Indigenous authors. And finally, 6% say talking to elders to learn from their experiences. Thanks to everyone who took the time to add your say. Stay tuned to aptnnews.ca for our next set of questions. Time for another break. Don't go anywhere. Starting on the East Coast, St. John's 20, Charlottetown 15. Kuujjuaq 4, Nain 1. Val-d'Or 13, Quebec City 13. North Bay 14, Toronto 19. Big Trout Lake 19, Sioux Lookout 21. Churchill 15, Thompson 16. Gimli 14, Winnipeg 14. North Battleford 12, Regina 12. Uranium City 10, La Ronge 14. High Level 18, Peace River 21. Edmonton 19, Calgary 17. Kamloops 22, Campbell River 19. Dease Lake 13, Smithers 18. Old Crow 7, Mayo 18. Norman Wells 12, Fort Simpson 22. Tuktoyaktuk -2, Colville Lake 8. Cambridge Bay 2, Baker Lake 8. Arctic Bay 6, Igloolik 2. Two solo exhibitions by First Nation artists opened this week at the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa before the public unveiling. Media and were invited for a preview of the exhibitions and the artists. Here's Annette Francis with more.
Welcome to the Dream House exhibit. Inside you'll find 25 years of creations by Mohawk artist Skawanati.
Well, it feels amazing to be here. I'm thrilled to be at the National Gallery of Canada and to see all this work that I've made over the last 25 years together in the most beautiful possible way.
Skawanati is a multimedia artist. Her work includes more than 100 works of art, from avatars to fashion, music, video, and stills, all inspired by her love for science fiction, historical events like the Oka Crisis, and her Mohawk culture. In Mohawk traditions, the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, are planted together because they nurture each other. Reflecting that tradition is Sustain Us, her most recent creation.
The story of how the three sisters became superheroes. And so it's told in two parts. The first part is a 10-minute long machinima music video, hip hop. I wrote a song. I found 3 people to perform it. And I found a wonderful person to also make the music, because I don't know how to do that myself. And so now I have this really great machinima music video, and it has a fashion collection.
Rochelle Dickinson is the National Gallery's Associate Curator of the Indigenous Ways and Colonization Department. It opened 3 years ago to be more inclusive of Indigenous peoples.
We have a lot of work to do. The department's relatively new, and some of that work is to catch up on who we look at and why we look at them in terms of supporting particular kinds of artists in Canada and internationally. And we do this because the National Gallery has a history as a settler colonial space, and so Indigenous artists like Nadia were consistently underrepresented.
Next door is Algonquin artist Nadia Mears' Waves of Want exhibit. She's thrilled to showcase her work.
Such an honor, and also I recognize that not everybody, there's a lot of great artists in Canada, and not everybody would have a show at the National Gallery. So I'm incredibly just delighted to have this kind of momentum brought to and attention brought to what I've been doing for the last 25 years.
Muir uses film, sculpture, audio, and photography to convey colonialism and relationships with Indigenous peoples. It's the collection of over 60 works.
There's a few kind of older works like the Indian Act or History in Two Parts or Portrait in Motion. Right behind me is a work called The History in Two Parts, which is half aluminum, half birch bark canoe. And to make it, I didn't know how to build a birch bark canoe all by myself, so I had to go find a teacher, and I found one in Kitigan-Zibi. I found Punuk Smith and worked with him to help bring this piece to life.
The solo exhibits will be on display for the public to see until September 1st. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Monday, June 2nd. I'm TR Wheatley. Join me again in a few hours for your evening newscast at 6 p.m. Eastern. From all of us at APTN National News, agasi, kitam, kawapamittinano.